Welcome back to Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I'm joined by Chris McElwain to try to analyse what went wrong tonight. It was Celtic 0, Kairat 0. Simply not good enough. 100 minutes, not enough done to win that game, Chris. Nowhere near it.
Yeah, it just wasn't good enough. Very simply, we just didn't play well enough. There's not enough quality in the team, not enough creativity in the team, not enough fight in the team. Very, very poor performance against a very well organised and disciplined opponent. I think there is an element of shared responsibility. I think on the night the players should have played better and maybe put some of that down to the manager. But there's a saying, and I think Chris Sutton's coined it tonight as well: fail to prepare to fail, and that's what's happened. We've taken a risk on getting to the Champions League before, or the perception is that we've taken a risk that we want to get in the Champions League and get past what is perceived to be a relatively easy tie. No, that's not the case now. Before we will enhance and augment the quality in this squad. I think the board are playing a criminally negligent game with the fans' faith, with the manager's ability to get the best out of a depleted team. And I think there is a huge amount of responsibility on, and I'm saying the board because they're not transparent enough to tell us where the failure in the recruitment process is, but it is a failure. It is an absolute failure. I've seen some comments saying it's a two-legged affair, absolutely, but you consider the fact we've never won in Kazakhstan. We don't travel to that location well. And I think the team we played tonight have surprised a few people with just how well organised and set up they are. They are no mugs. And we are off our game at the moment. So I see somebody there saying who predict a 5-0 win. Yeah, fair enough. My predictions are back to the old habits.
That's not the issue. That's not the story tonight, Chris. That's not the story. I mean, there's a million people just waiting to try and jump on somebody's opinion before a game. There's nothing wrong with the champ. Would you rather hear Chris say, I think we'll get gubbed 3-0? Come on, that's nothing to do with the analysis. The analysis is the performance tonight. It's going into this game into a situation that you finish the game with the following. See, when you get the starting 11, Chris, an hour before the kickoff, and we have a discussion before the game, there's a mantra, and it comes from Brendan Rodgers, that the finishing 11 is as important as the starting 11. So I'm going to read the 11 that finished the game tonight. Schmeichel in goals with Tony Ralston at right back, Liam Scales at left back, Trusty and CCV in the middle, midfield Rio, McGregor and Engels, and up top Yang, Shin Yamada, who's played 130 games of senior football at the age of 25, and Maida on the left. So the issue isn't Chris or anybody else making a prediction of 5-0. The issue is we've gone in underprepared. We've been talking about it all summer, and there's always enough people to come in and say you're entitled. Transfers aren't that easy to do. Well, Club Brugge made it pretty easy to make transfers. We were looking at their performance last night. We were looking at what they've done in the transfer window. It's all excuses. It's smoke and mirrors. All you need to do is watch the game back and listen to the chants from the Celtic fans. I mobbed Celtic Park once again, not in the season ticket, but we turned up in our numbers and we mobbed the place out, sell it out, and the cries were sack the board. Sack the board. Yeah. Right, so when you're Brendan Rodgers, and every single time you've got a press conference, you're virtually begging for signings to happen. You're saying, I can't magic them here. He says that there are things out with his control, and we line up, and that's the finishing 11. You've got Scales playing at left back. He's not even a left back. You've got Tony Ralston playing at right back. He's played 140 games of football in 11 seasons. You've got Shin Yamada at 25, not Brendan Rodgers. He's signing. This is where the problem is. Yang could have been out the door to Norwich earlier on if we had more bodies in. So we've gone in, we're talking about a perceived risk, no perception required. The biggest risk you could imagine with 70-odd million quid plus sitting in the bank. We know it's more than that because we've already made a profit in this transfer window of something like £23 million. And we go in having to play Liam Scales at left back because Kieran is getting managed into the side. Yang at right wing. Seriously, that's what you've put on the park. We're now going to Kazakhstan in a week's time, and the chances are We won't qualify for the Champions League. You've played Russian roulette with 40 million quid. Now, what's the ramifications of Celtic not getting through this tie, Chris? I ask you that. What's the ramifications to the football club? Who's to blame? Who's to blame?
I think it's whoever's calling the shots on recruitment, right? Like I say, the board are not transparent enough to tell us which part of the process is not working. But for me, if we base it purely on the results, and I mean the results of recruitment, we haven't strengthened. We've seen an injury tonight to one of your key players, which is again going to lead to a requirement for reinforcements. Players playing out of position, players of not the requisite quality. And we know they're not the requisite quality because the manager's prepared to shut them out, right? He just can't because he's got no one else in the building at the moment. This board, and we have to point it at the board, right? Because they're a collective and they're collectively failing. They're failing the club, they're failing the supporters, and they're failing a manager who I think was positioned to build a legacy of success, to build a second legacy of success at our club. And the board have said, no, we're not doing that. We know better than a tenured professional, and yes, I'll say it, an elite level manager. I think there are personnel behind the scenes at the club who are unfit for purpose. They are incapable of taking this club any further forward. They are resting on the laurels of past success, only a part of which they are responsible for. And I think change is now required. We are no longer a forward-thinking progressive football club, if we ever were. But I think we're just further away from it than we've ever been, and it's frightening. And we now, the ramifications are not getting through, is we lose the spot that we worked so hard to gain at Europe's top table. We potentially lose the ability to maintain our dominance domestically, and we lose a manager that is conditioned to bring us success. And I think that's horrendous.
Right, again, Den and anybody else talking about a prediction, I never predict a 5-0 win to Celtic. But I'll tell you something, if you're focusing on that, Den, you're not seeing what the problem is. I'll tell you what's totally embarrassing. Finishing the game with Yang at right wing, finishing the game with Scales at left back, Den. That's embarrassing. I'll tell you what's embarrassing. Selling Kuhn for 17 million a Lagerbielke for 3 and no spending it. That's embarrassing. Nothing to do with some football fans' prediction. I mean, come on, let's focus on what has gone wrong tonight. And the root of the problem isn't a prediction for a football game. It's the fact that we've gone in underprepared. You've got a manager there, right, who, let's be honest, we're never going to get a better manager than Brendan Rodgers. And who would take the job, having seen what's happened tonight and during this pre-season? I said it before the game. You look at the start 11, right? Count how many of the starting players were signed over the last 2, 4, 6, 5 transfer windows by Brendan Rodgers. 4 players. 4 players started the game who were signed by Brendan Rodgers. The recruitment system at this football club is completely dysfunctional. The people making the decisions in terms of the parameters that we need to work within until perhaps we get through, and that's a big, massive but, because it doesn't even look as though that's going to happen. And they're sitting there in their ivory tower because they won't speak to the fans, Chris. They don't do it. They do not speak to the fans. They do not allow the fans to hold them accountable for their lack of vision, their lack of ambition. You've got a stadium there that's needing major reinvestment. You've got a team on the park needing major reinvestment. How can you tap into that kind of riches? Oh, well, the only way you can tap into those riches in Scottish football is by qualifying for the Champions League. So be prepared for it. And they've been completely underprepared. I'm going to bring in as many comments as I can tonight on a frustrating night for Celtic. And it now looks as though we're going to Kazakhstan. We would need to make history in Kazakhstan. We've never won a game of football over there. So that's how difficult this task is. We've got Ross Evans. Thank you for supporting the channel. Signings boost the team and energise the fans. They also energise the team. They energise the dynamic within the dressing room and obviously the tempo of the team on the park as well. Our board are choosing to focus on bringing the fans to heel instead. Yes, the concourse, the barriers, banning fans last season, making statements in relation to the types of banners, etc. Why don't you do your job? Why don't you make sure we've got the best football team possible on the park? They're sucking the life out of us. Yeah, they absolutely are. And for those who say you're spoiled, just count the trophies and all that, It's a short-sighted argument. Chris, it's a short-sighted argument.
It absolutely is. Look, we're supporters, right? But from a business standpoint, we are customers. When 99% of your customers are unhappy with the product that you're producing, you're doing something wrong, right? You're doing something wrong. I'm sorry, they cannot look to the thousands of supporters at the stadium, the millions of supporters, that follow the club, and say, you know nothing about football. Your opinion doesn't matter. Your views are invalid. Nonsense. There are people out there who've made success of their lives, who know how a football operation works, and know how a business works. And they can
flip it. What does a CEO know about being a CEO of a big business?
Well, yes, absolutely.
You know, was he headhunted from another organisation because he had deployed that role so well as a CEO? No, he wasn't. Absolutely. He was already within the fabric of the clique, and he was promoted from within. The minute we bring anybody in with any kind of vision or new ideas who want to buck the trend, they won't last. Don Mackay being a classic example. Yeah. So being the bastard, we'll keep it clean, seeing how, even though we're after the watershed, I said it at half-time, we've been poor since Munich. A lot of people have said that. Mm-hmm. And one of the main reasons that we came as close as we did against Bayern Munich was Nicholas Kuhn, who's been sold and not replaced. And this is the problem that we've got. For a spell tonight, we had Nygren playing out right. We then had to put Yang out there. And when you're looking at the issues that we have in the team, they've actually been compounded this evening because Alistair Johnston was stretchered off, right? And Alistair Johnston has started the season brilliantly. He's been one of our biggest attacking threats. He's injured. How long is he going to be out? Does that mean that, as well as all the other players that we need, we also need a right back? Because at the moment, if you look at the first team squad, we only have, if you take Alistair Johnston out of the equation, we only have Tony Ralston and Stephen Welsh. There's your two right backs. So you're going to have Welsh at right back and Scales at left back. That's just poor squad management. Dublin Celt, 76. Wow, Idah really was the issue, wasn't he, lads? Sat at the board. Just because we didn't win the game when he went off, I'm sorry. Adam Idah is a point of discussion that I think we need to have. Yes. So when you're looking at, as I said before, for anyone who never tuned in, we've got 3,500 people watching right now. Some might be coming on to mock. Hey, listen, Celtic were terrible tonight, so mock away, but keep it clean, or you'll obviously, if you're a troll, you won't last very long. Adam Idah, first 6 months at the football club, earned his move. Now, I remember talking about it at the time, and even when that fee, the transfer fee, was going up and up, and by the way, again, something we did wrong as a football club was not getting a loan to buy at the time. There was talk of him going to Italy. There was a transfer fee arranged with a loan to buy. We didn't have that inserted, so that's bad business. So anyway, they knew we needed a striker. Norwich also knew that Brendan wanted Adam Idah, and it goes up and up and up to the point where we've overpaid for the striker. However, last season, I still think that over the entirety of the season, and in particular the Champions League campaign, he put in enough performances. There's something up with Adam Idah this season. And I think when you look at it, you look at the issue that I mentioned at half-time. Okay, he's human. He goes out, has a few drinks, it goes viral. That is the sign of the times. If you misbehave, it will be public knowledge. Brendan Rodgers stands up for him. We then go to the Sporting Lisbon game during the pre-season. And I was talking to someone at the game who said that when he was hooked, again at half-time, Adam Idah, like he was tonight, he was hooked at half-time. One of the fitness coaches put him through his paces. So the half-time break was underway and the game was underway, to the point where he was vomiting up in the side of the park. So I don't know if there was an issue with his fitness, but he was given additional fitness training to the point of no return, basically. And then you come into the new season, not performing that well, but Brendan's telling us that he's excellent. But there's one thing that I need to bring up here, and that's these links to Udinese. And at the time, I smelt a rat. And I said at the point of the Udinese interest, this is the agent putting a story back out there so that the Italian clubs who were interested, because there were two in the January that we brought them in, it may re-spark their interest in Adam Idah, right? There was no links to Udinese. I think it was Quinny that did his checks with his Italian contacts. There was no links to Udinese. It was all paper talk or agent talk, right? So if he is doing that whole thing, remember Kyogo was wanted by Man City, and then he Kyogo was never wanting to be Man City. This is the agent, right, trying to put the word out there. And then, interestingly enough, I listened to it this morning, Brendan Rodgers' pre-match press conference talking about it, because it was very specific, Chris, talking about the wages. Once the wage drops into your bank account every month from Celtic, you give 100% to Celtic. It's all adding up to the point where there's an issue with Adam Idah, and that was the worst first half of football I've seen him playing in a Celtic jersey. So was he the problem in the entirety of the game? No. Was he part of the issue?
Yes.
Massively, Chris. So where do you go from here with Adam Idah? Because you look at the other strikers we have available, Shin Yamada, Callum Osman's never played senior football, and Johnny Kenny. And again, you go right back to why we're in that position.
Yeah, managers operating with, these hands tied behind his back. It's ridiculous. Adam Idah tonight, the problem with the position he plays, he's part of the spine of the team. And if part of the spine doesn't work, the rest of the team doesn't work. And I think the responsibility is too big for Adam Idah now. I think everything you've just listed there, which was spoken about at length on various bulletins, and I felt tonight was last chance saloon for Adam Idah. I thought he needed a big performance, but I thought there was a lot at stake. And what was at stake is if he didn't perform tonight, I think he was going to reach that point of no return in terms of the fan support, much of which had already turned on him anyway. But I think he's no longer a player that will have the manager's trust. And I think the fact he was taken off at half-time proves that. Now, the big problem is that who the hell else do you bring in at the moment? There isn't anyone. You have to take Maeda from the wing and put him in there. And to be fair, Maeda, I thought, his movement was far sharper. A one-on-one chance that he should do better with. But I think if he's on for the start, you give the Kairat players, the Kairat defenders in particular, a bigger problem. Adam Idah may as well have not been there in the first half because the defender didn't know he was there. He did nothing to impose himself on the game, whereas I think Maeda gives you that. But you're taking Maeda into the middle, you're putting Yang out on the left. And Yang had a 5-minute spell where he was pretty effective. And then...
Are you going to say he looked busy?
Bless him. Yeah, I'll just say bless him, right, for 5 minutes. He's not good enough. The manager knows he's not good enough because the manager's prepared to let him leave, right? That's no disrespect to the player. Not good enough, right? And I think it's about time we start calling out players who are not good enough to wear this jersey. And as the saying goes, the jersey doesn't shrink to fit inferior players. We're trying to force a jersey onto inferior players, and it's because we cannot get the quality players in through a failure in a key process of the football operation.
Well, the thing with these players, Chris, the one that you've mentioned, I have said all along, I don't think he's good enough for Celtic, but I think there's a deeper issue here. Because when you ask, listen, I hope Celtic go out there next week and somehow manage to get through.
Yeah.
And I still think even if we do, there's ramifications because of the way that we've gone about our business or not. And I don't think Brendan Rodgers, his mind will have been made up as a result of having promises when he comes back to the football club that he spoke about in his very first press conference. And it was around the club's expectations on a signing were here and his expectations were there. And it was about quality. And I don't know how many times he's used the word quality.
Oh, it's like Claxon word by this point. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
He's been presented with a left back called Inamura, who was £250,000 and who he's already admitted is not up to it defensively. He's been presented with players that he's looked, and it's not the player's fault, but they're simply not good enough to progress to the level that we want to progress to. Brendan Rodgers' first time round, this is the kind of thing that created the unravelling of his Celtic career first time round. I think he's changed. He's already spoken about it time and time again. He's not going to allow that to happen. He will stay because he's agreed to stay to the end of the season. But why on earth would anyone, right, who wants to progress, who wants to play at the top level of European football, stay when everything that the board is doing is against your will? It's against your progression, your ambition to progress. And I'm going to go back to it, though. It's the ramifications of not qualifying this time round, because back in the day, and yeah, the chant is sack the board, sack the board, sack the board. We can't sack the board. No. What are the ramifications? We're now in a situation where, having a successful football team is great. You look at the last 25 years, you can count the trophies. You can look at 9 in a row. You can look at 4 trebles in a row. And absolutely phenomenal. Loved every single moment of it. Always love winning trophies, Chris. But you can't use that to mask the million deficiencies that continually come to the fore. So there's a shot there. There's a shot where it goes to the board area of the stand, in the main stand, and they're sitting and they have no answers. They have no answers. You can't be looking at Brendan Rodgers going, we've given you the tools, it's your fault. So what are the ramifications? And this is where it starts to get difficult, because in terms of the way that the club's run, the ownership of the club, the controlling manner in which the club is operated, the fans don't have a great say in what happens next, right? So with regards to protesting, with regards to tifos and banners, etc., the board think that we are spoilt and entitled anyway, Chris, so they will ignore this. They're putting up boundaries in the concourses to prevent you from moving around the stadium. You're getting treated like a lower class by the Celtic board already, right? We're selling jerseys in record amounts. We've made more money. We've got more money in the bank than at any other point in the history of any Scottish football club in the history of Scottish football. Yet we haven't sufficiently invested in this team to the point where we've come up against a team from Kazakhstan who scraped through against Slovan Bratislava in the last round. This is their third qualifying round. And we are struggling. We're going to struggle to get through. I'm not one of these fans who's, you know what, we can drop into the Europa, maybe we'll win it. That team that finished the game tonight wouldn't get anywhere in the Europa League, Chris.
No,
nowhere.
Not good enough. Yeah, I would agree. No, I think the ramifications are that we'll lose our manager and the board won't spend, because if we're out of the Champions League, they won't say they need to spend. We are run by people with masochistic, self-harming tendencies towards our football club. That's the only way I can describe it. It's a form of self-harming from a business standpoint. The short-termism and the short-sightedness of not investing in a game which guarantees you 40 million if you go into it fully prepared is insane. There's no business sense and there's no football sense to that. It makes no sense. If someone can find a way to show me strategically how that makes sense, honestly, I'll buy them the best meal they've ever had, because it doesn't.
There is no way.
There is no way.
There is no way, Chris. And the thing is, you bring that up, and you'll be looked down upon by the people making these decisions. You'll be entitled. You buy your ticket, you buy your jersey, and you be quiet and you sit there and just watch us running the business, because that is the attitude that they have to the support. They don't communicate with us. They don't communicate with us. I mean, the CEO of a football company, a football club, who never, and I mean never, communicates with the fans, is one who's either not willing to engage or is incapable of engaging. Those that need to change are the board, not the fans. The attitude of the board needs to change, and those within the boardroom needs to change. How do you force that? That's a more difficult question. That would fill many 1 hour episodes of Celtic State.
You know, I just saw a fantastic comment up there, and I do want to reference. I'm sorry, the comments are going too fast. I can't bring it up. But the point that was made is, in any business, and I've worked for quite a few very reputable international businesses, right, without blowing my own trumpet. If in a business you make a decision that costs that company £40 million of revenue, you lose your job. In any private sector business, I guarantee it. If you make a decision that costs you 40 million, right, you lose your job. It's just not even up for debate, right?
Every time we fail to qualify when we've had qualifiers, how many of the board have lost their job? How many CEOs have lost their job? How many chairmen have lost? None of them.
That's exactly the point. Nobody is there to be held accountable, because there's nobody holding them accountable. Nobody is taking the fall, because it's a collective failure and they're not prepared to take the fall. It's insane. They've put barriers up to prevent the football club being run as a transparent, regulated business, right? They want all the benefits that come with that, but they will not toe the line when it comes to performance. It's ridiculous.
Brendan McCarthy, you're in on the YouTube. That was absolutely terrible. But that is exactly what we get when the board do not care about the club or the fans. They should be ashamed, but the board don't care. No, the very fact we're having this conversation, Brendan, they'll see us as being entitled. We are the problem. They need to look inward. They won't change. They need to change. Sack the board, simply, says Jonathan Brown. The bigger question, Jonathan, and this is something I'm sure in the aftermath of tonight we will talk about on Acsom, and we'll dig deeper into it, is we know it's just obviously the terminology we've always used. We can't sack the board, but what can we do? What can we do to ensure that, and it goes right to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is that there's one person controls the entire football club. Yeah. And that one person, albeit he's got a larger shareholder than anybody else, he doesn't own the football club, yet he operates it and controls it as if he does. And that's Dermot Desmond. And then from there, you have stooges who just do what they're told. Stooges who are getting paid very good wages just for doing what they're told, and they're in position. They look at Brendan Rodgers, an ambitious manager, as the issue, because he wants to spend money. He wants to push the envelope. They would much rather buy Inamura for 250 grand and Yamada for £1.5 million. Guys who have made absolutely zero, no, by the way, not their fault, absolutely zero impact on our quest to qualify for the Champions League. No impact. You have to bring players in that not only start games, but make a positive impact and improve your starting 11. And there's two examples of the 8 players were brought in this summer who certainly have not done that. Noah Redmond, here we go. Sack the board, simple enough. How do you do it? That's a big question, Noah. I'm not disagreeing with you. I know that's the terminology we use. Let's say, how do we force change on the board? How do we force change at the football club? We've been talking about it. By the way, we've been talking about it on this platform for 8 years. And beyond that, throughout that period, rather, we've seen the quadruple treble. We have clinched the 9 in a row. We've been talking about it throughout. People think that you're a crackpot when you're talking about it and you're winning trebles and you're winning 9 in a row. But the same issues existed then that exist right now. It was the same issues with regards to a failure to actually change. We've got a youth development programme that doesn't work. We've got an academy that doesn't produce footballers for Celtic. We've got a stadium that needs major reinvestment. We've got a team that needs major reinvestment. We've got a media platform that doesn't work. And we've got a communication platform that doesn't communicate with the fans. These are things that existed 8 years ago when we started, and they still exist to this day. John Sweeney, 2 shots on target the whole 90 minutes, unacceptable, and all thanks to our board. People will say, oh, well, the board weren't playing, John. But it's deeper than that, isn't it? It's deeper than that. You lost Jota last season. Where is his replacement? You lost Kyogo in January. We knew he wanted to leave last summer. Yeah. Where's his replacement? Remember the Man City story?
Yeah. 2 first-team players.
Agent-driven story put out to the press to get interest in the player. That was last summer. You lose Kuhn on the right-hand side. Where's his replacement? You're not telling me that Engels was Matt O'Reilly's replacement. 2 completely different players. We don't replace the talent that we lose. We've got Red Tim coming in. Zero ambition from the board. And so they'll be happy that we do not qualify. There's a narrative that the boards are happy just to be 1 inch ahead of our rivals domestically. If that's their ambition, then their ambition is not big enough for Celtic Football Club. No. Kurgan, I'm not even at the game and I want my money back. Absolutely. Colin Bean comes in, bit more energy and urgency in the second half, but still lamentably poor. How thin does that squad look? Yeah. And what are the board seeing that we aren't? A spreadsheet, Colin. They're seeing a spreadsheet and they see us as being the entitled ones. They don't listen to us as fans. Jamie Murphy, brutal performance. I'm bringing up as many as I can because this is your show. So you will be very, very frustrated. 4,500 of you tuning in as we speak. You and Boy Martin, Celtic even at a loss. I think Yang made a big difference tonight. He might not be a starter, but a very good impact player. I don't think Yang's good enough. I think
he's not. You're
looking at a situation where it's the best of a bad bunch almost at the moment. And Ewan has stood up for Yang for the entirety of last season as well. All Celtic board members are guilty. DD destroying the club. We need to get these charlatans out. Again,
Desmond talking about.
I know double denim destroying the club. I don't disagree with you, Ewan, but I would throw it back to him and everybody who are feeling the same way. How do you do it? How do you do it, right? Because back in the day, and I've spoken about this before, there was a strategy. And the strategy was between the kind of street movement of the Celtic activists, and they obviously started off, I think, through the pages of the fanzines, etc. But if we didn't boycott games, the club would have died. And what they did is they forced the change by boycotting the games. You'll remember it. I'm going to the Celtic games during this period, and they found out that if the attendance at a Celtic home game dropped under, I think it was 10,000, then the club was no longer being ran as a going concern. And the Bank of Scotland at the time could call in their overdraft at the time, which was £5 million plus. That then puts the board under severe pressure. It opens the door for Fergus McCann to come in. And obviously the rest, as they say, is history. That wouldn't work now. That wouldn't work. That would let the board know that there's a group of fans who are unhappy with them, but it wouldn't force the change that we're requiring. Yeah. So there needs to be a strategy, and I think in the next few weeks and months, and it will be ramped up if we don't qualify for the Champions League. Fans need to actually start speaking to each other as to the best approach to make this change, Chris.
There needs to be a strategy, and it needs to be something that's cohesive, that's well thought out, has the right level of governance, and ultimately has a consistent collective aim, and that's to improve the football club. I mean, we're not talking like, well, we are talking takeover here, right? But you need people who are willing to do it. You need people who have that long-term forecast about where they can take the club and need to be able to demonstrate it, right? And frankly, and this is the key thing, you're going to need people to put their money where their mouth is. Do what this board will not do. Put the money where the mouth is and say, right, I'm going to commit to this club. I want the best for this club, but I am going to find a way to get the assets behind us in order to go in there. And whether it's making an offer they can't refuse, or just saying, look, we're coming in, we're going to make a bid for the shares. Just it has to be something. But ultimately, the problem is that the board have the power. They have the power. Desmond is the major shareholder. He's under no obligation to sell. Can do what he wants.
He's already said he won't.
Yeah,
he says that the shares are going to go to his son.
Your options are so limited, particularly in the short term, and it's frustrating because nobody more than I do wants this club to progress. I want us to go to the next level. I want us to go upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards. I don't know how we do it.
Put the brakes on, Chris. To put the brakes on. Yep. We could have gone upwards and upwards. There was a moment last season. There was a moment last season, and again, it was in spite of the board. It was in spite of the board that we got so close against Bayern Munich, because we went into that game. You look at the second leg over in Germany and look at the substitutions that we made that night. There was no options on the bench. There were no, to the point where Rodgers didn't make many substitutions. Yes. Had that gone into extra time, we were seconds away from getting into extra time. We did not have the reinforcements on the bench. No. So the signs were already there. And for anybody who might support another team in Glasgow coming on saying, that we are having a meltdown, I didn't see many Celtic fans leaving after 20 minutes. Of the game. Stephen Broadley, so much for a 3 or 4 goal scoreline. Delusional, Stephen, is expecting to get through to the Champions League after spending £3 million. So let's not focus on fans making predictions before the game. I'm pretty sure people would have had an issue if anybody on Acsom had said, I think we're going to get gubbed tonight. You'd have been called negative X, Y, and Z. You know what? Yeah. In the future, it doesn't even matter if you make a prediction. So let's not focus on that.
Generally a bit of fun. Although I would say I think you've been a bit harsh on on our great rivals fans that have joined us tonight, because they've lasted for half an hour, which is 10 minutes longer than they lasted last night. So I mean,
it is actually.
They're getting better.
Yeah, it's interesting that you hate a club more than you love your own. It's clear Celtic doesn't practice shooting. Not had one shot outside the box all night. Yeah, they were devoid of ideas. Bit of creativity. Is he playing to get away, Stevie boy? You listen, the word I had, and it's not about being in the know, but you speak it to enough people in and around the game who are still involved in the game. You speak to enough journalists, you speak to agents, and the word I was getting is if he was back, he was going to sign another 3-year deal. That's not going to happen. That ain't going to happen. Then it's a 2-leg battle, guys. Keep the faith. Listen, I'm a positive guy, Den. I'm a positive guy. I think there's a wee bit of blind faith because we're going to be playing the same team, less Alistair Johnston in the next leg. HRIMR, sure, I think they're still favourites to win, but this performance is unacceptable. We've also got Tony. Great to see you, Tony. I'm not buying any Celtic stuff till I'm happy. That's all the power I have. And we've also got Matty McIntyre. I wanted Shinnon from the start. Idah just isn't cutting it. My issue with that, Matt, Idah isn't cutting it. You're right. I don't think Shin's the answer either. The ball was bouncing off him like a hot potato. So, I think his inexperience, people think about experience, Chris, and go, but he's 25. He's hardly played. He's not got a lot of experience in terms of game time.
Yeah, he's not. And I just think you look at, you listed 3 players that we've lost, and one of them's Kyogo, and the drop-off in quality is just alarming. Idah has never been able to elevate his game to look at the same quality as a Kyogo, or dare I say, even a Yakimakis at this point. We hope he would, but I don't think it's going to happen. As we go into the game next week, I've got faith in the manager. I've got faith in some of those players to go and step up to the mark and do the job. I'm not sure I've got faith in certain other personnel, and I certainly don't have faith in the boardroom or the back room to prepare us for that match.
Well, what I would say, and again, it's water off a duck's back when you've been on the show for 8 years, but it's not the fans' fault tonight.
No.
The fans are absolutely blameless. It's
blame.
not anybody's fault who is speaking on a Celtic podcast. You've got to lay the blame at the door of the right people when these things happen. And when things are good and we come on and talk about things that are perceived to be negative, Chris, is because they eventually do come home to roost. The issues around the stadium, for example, 2 years ago, I started doing the Wandering Paradise, and I'm saying to all the Acsom troops, what a state the stadium's in, by the way. Honestly, it really needs major reinvestment. You don't see it as much when there's 60,000 people milling about, but on a cold Monday morning at 8 o'clock where there's not a soul kicking about, you see every single bit of rust, every single bit that needs work done to it. So not even rebuilding the main stand. So this is a lack of reinvestment year on year, hoarding money, stockpiling money. Why? What's it for? Your rainy day fund is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. You failed to get into Europe, and then you've got the money to fall back on, but you were the cause of not getting there. It really is a ridiculous situation to put us in. JD, Hatate was the only player who seemed to want to win. I agree with you, JD. I thought right up to the end, he tried, and it didn't always come off for him. But I think he does get pass marks for me tonight. Tony, thank you for supporting the channel. Absolutely brilliant. I met Tony at one of our gigs a couple of years ago. It was lovely to meet you. That board won't get lucky again with the next gaffer, says HRIMR. Listen, anybody coming into this environment, any manager coming into this environment with this board, I think there's 2 types of manager that we've had in the recent past. You've got the type of manager that Brendan Rodgers is, who wants to progress, who wants to push the envelope, and it will cost a few quid, and he doesn't suffer fools, and he doesn't take the nonsense from the hierarchy at the football club. And I think we've seen that on both occasions because he walked as a result of that first time round. Ange, I would say, is cut from the same cloth. He got an opportunity in England. He took it, but I don't think that he was going to just take what he was given. And it got to that point where, the hit signings were getting lesser and lesser. I think kind of some of the latter signings, Moy and Johnston apart, simply were not good enough. That instant flurry that he had with all the great buys that we had, that was short-lived. So obviously he couldn't work under these conditions. You've got managers who will be prepared to, and it's the likes of Tony Mowbray, Neil Lennon, particularly the second time round, Ronnie Dyler, who will be presented with players and will just do it. They'll just do it. They won't have the same level, I don't think, of influence as a Brendan Rodgers or Ange. And it gets to the point where if they can't influence it anymore, they've taken it as far as they can, Chris, and they leave the football club. So you're talking about the next gaffer. I don't even want to think about the level of the next gaffer, because if nothing changes at the football club, reference the last 3 guys that I was speaking about there. Ronnie Dyler, Tony Mowbray, Neil Lennon. That's the level of manager that you're going to be looking at. And I know Lenny achieved far more than the other 2 as a Celtic manager, but in terms of the influence that he had, the weight that he was able to throw about in negotiations. I've heard stories directly from the players where they were sold from under the manager's nose by the club.
You cannot undermine the football operation and the manager. You just can't. You'll never build any sustainable success on a football park doing that. Certainly not progressive success. I should emphasise that. Domestically, there's not a challenge, right? There's just not a challenge at the moment. And I would challenge any of our rivals fans who are currently polluting the chat to argue that point. There's no domestic challenge. So our level is Europe at the moment, but we need the manager who is given the tools to go and progress at that level and progress the football club, and he'll never do that if they are continually undermined by a board who does not share the same vision, does not share the same ambition, and does not share the same desire to see the football club go beyond its current position.
Yeah, they're scared to push it any further. They'll let it go, get so bad that we're actually happy to sign a 38-year-old Vardy. We dedicated quite a bit yesterday's show to that. 100 million quid in the bank. That's where it'll be, there or thereabouts. Failed to go through against a team with the riches of Motherwell. And you know what, right? See, obviously, with regards to the last financial statement, and we've made a lot more money since then, if it's hanging about the £100 million, they'll see that as the success. Whereas they should be looking at Champions League progression as the success, Chris. Now, I know that both of those elements have to be right, but one of them so far outweighs the other. The non-football bit, with all the money in the bank, 100 million quid, that's absolutely unnecessary for a Scottish football club to have that much money in the bank. You and Boy Martin's not having a yang bang. I'm glad you're not. He made a positive impact tonight, but do think he is only effective on the left, not the right. And again, if that's the case, he's forced onto the right, isn't he, Ewan? He's forced onto the right because we don't have the bodies. So yeah, a very frustrating night for everybody relating to Celtic Football Club, every fan who was at the game, everybody who has tuned in tonight. We're sitting at 5,200 viewers watching this live stream, and many frustrated Celtic fans. Please get a sniper, says Kieran.
There's a few infiltrators.
Well, there will be, but unfortunately, by the end of a 40-hour stream, there'll probably be about 2,000 or 3,000 comments. And when you see it in its live form, Kieran, it is virtually, rolling past on the screen. You can't even see a lot of them, so you've got to go and look for them. So I'll be doing that after the event. Unfortunately, it would take someone to do it full time. And not speak to anybody else.
Well, I'll just say, Kieran, just remember, we're a charitable group of supporters, and making a certain group of fans feel better about themselves after last night is, that's just our duty to do so.
They're non-entities. Their opinion means absolutely nothing. I think that when Celtic fans look at the situation, we're able to figure it out for ourselves without the input of any outside agency, regardless of who they support. I mean, we've had a lot of people coming onto the chat group over the years from various different football teams, and if it's football chat, brilliant. If it's your usual nonsense, just let it go. I've got to say thanks everybody for getting involved. 5,200 of you on the live stream. I could talk all night, but I'm pretty sure Chris wants to go to his kit. We will be back tomorrow at 12:30. A pint of what? 12:30 tomorrow. It'll be myself and JP, and we'll try to unpack exactly what went wrong tonight. I'm not watching it back tomorrow. I've got my notes. I'm not going to watch that back. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you, Chris McElwain, for joining me on a Celtic State of Night.